of the initial responses that I saw to the creator economy that I did not love was wood-paneled agencies going, uh-oh, these kids are better at our job than we are. And that to me completely misses the point of what they are providing. I think creators are an endless source of inspiration. They are often showing us the edges of culture. They help us see around the corner of culture, sometimes before something has hit in the lives of consumers, or you're able to research it or find out through data.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by CreatorIQ.
Hello. Hi, friend.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, so good.
I'm really excited to have you here. Thanks for joining Earned. This is my good friend, Jen Costello. We have known each other for, it's going to date us, 16 years?
I don't do the math at this point in my career or our friendship, so I think 16 sounds good. It's better than the 20 that I think we originally ballparked. So
Maybe,
I think that works.
I think I maybe pushed us back a few years.
Stop.
So we started our baby advertising careers together at an agency in Austin in 2009. So sorry, I'm forcing you to do the math. And since then, you've gone on to do some pretty big things. You are now the Global Chief Strategy Officer at TBWA. No big deal.
NBD.
Congrats.
Thanks, bud.
We'll get into all that, but I want to start. I know you like a good curveball question, and we've known each other long enough to where I know you have this, but I want to know one or two of your most embarrassing professional moments.
Oh, Brit!
I can start to give you a
Okay.
minute.
All right.
I have two. Both actually were at Maggie Rogers where we worked together.
Perfect. Let's hear.
The first is how I got the job in the first place. I still can't actually believe I did this, but I did a resume with a cover letter, printed out cover letter of myself physically wearing many hats to show that my time in nonprofit, which is how I worked before agency, could come into play at a multifaceted, multidimensional creative role.
This is
Put
such
me
a
in, coach.
genuine response for me because I have, number one, never heard this. Number two, it's honestly, the power of metaphor has always been really a strong suit for you. So
Yeah, and it's nothing like the obvious, right?
Yeah.
Really put it out there. So luckily they ignored that and still gave me the conversation. So we got to meet each other. The second was right after I got the job, despite my cover letter. About a week or two in was Halloween, and everyone made it a big deal that people dressed up and got really into it. And so I wanted to bring my A game again, team of creatives. So I homemade, I don't know if you actually remember this, homemade a California raisin outfit, including a black trash bag stuffed with newspapers, white gloves, a microphone, the Ray-Bans, whole 9 yards. Because it was the bag stuffed with newspaper, it made noise. Walked into that agency, not a soul was dressed up.
Why a California raisin?
I don't know. I think at the time I thought it was clever, maybe.
Let me help you make this make sense in any way. The question of what's an embarrassing, brutal story about you is actually my favorite thing to ask people that join my team. There's nothing worse than give me a fun fact or an interesting fact. This is such a better question. No one has ever asked me this, so I'm a little, the one that is probably also at McGarry. We were young. Boy,
So
we were
young.
young. We were awfully young. I had recently learned that presentations are called decks.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Decks. They're called decks. So there was a delightful, you remember the guy that ran PR at McGarry Jesse.
Yes.
And he and I were in the printing area, which was a relatively small, confined area, but, kind of open to the rest of the agency. And I thought I was just being so clever and demonstrating advertising knowledge. And I was like, Eric, is that your deck on the printer? Is this your big deck? Because it was quite a large presentation. It was printing up many pages. I repeated this word 3 or 4 times as he looked just horrified. And I was like, well, that didn't work. I was trying to make connections with somebody a little bit older. And I walked out of the area, and actually the woman who managed you at the time literally grabbed me by the shoulders.
And you're mortified, I'm sure.
I hadn't even caught it.
Because you were using your terminology.
I was just asking Eric if that was his big day. Oh, no! No. So in some ways, that was my very first crash course moment on don't do the buzzwords. No one likes it. Say what you mean what you say. Don't do that, because boy, you could really just step in it like I did.
Well, obviously that was not a limiting factor in
No.
your growth. So like people can make mistakes and move on. We all move on. We all make mistakes. So flash forward a little bit. You started at Chiat. Obviously, you went to Martin beforehand, kind of made a few moves, landed at Chiat in LA as a senior planner. 9 years later, you get
Let's call it earned.
yeah, let's call it
Yeah.
earned, the Global Chief Strategy Officer role.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that ride, 9 years, one company, obviously like full on like trajectory kind of to the top, if you will. What did that look like?
I had loved the agencies I was in before. I feel like in some ways, sometimes the way I tell my stories, I actually would prefer to have ended sometimes at McGarrett Jesse than started there, because it was such a culture of like, do things the right way. We're going to drive this thing off of a cliff before we do work we don't want to do or work with clients we don't like. Not a lot of respect, quite frankly, for rules and convention. I went to the Martin agency, got a little bit of that, but I was working on a very big account at the time. I was spending a lot of time on Walmart. So like really quite a sort of regulated, disciplined, sometimes quite a linear thinking kind of brand. And by the time I got to Chiat, I was so hungry for a culture that didn't care if I Kool-Aid manned my way through the nearest wall in order to get to the great work, do the good stuff. It was a place that allowed me to turn up if I had a good idea. It did not matter my title. If I turned up brilliantly in a meeting, I got to the next one and the next one. If I was powerful and potent and useful in creative reviews, I got to a bigger table and a more senior table. And that was what I loved about that agency. It's actually what's kept me there effectively, within Chiat and then TBWA now for a decade, which is like, it is ruthless and relentless about anything in pursuit of the idea. It's not at any cost, but it's certainly at any reasonable cost. And just having that sole focus is the thing that has lit me up and kept me doing the job, because, it can be a punishing job. It's a really rewarding job, but that's the thing that I loved the most about my time at Chiat.
It's also, I think, it has rewarded and really played into your superpower, which is like getting to the goods, right? We talked a little bit about that in terms of buzzwords and like clearing the noise of like what you think you should be doing versus like, what is the good work? What is the good insight? How do you get there? How do you know what good work is?
I mean, not to be such a pedantic ninny here on this podcast with you, but I think good work is actually some ways the problem. I don't want good. I want great. I want disruptive. I want exceptional. I want the stuff that your kid and your grandma's talking about. Like, that's what I'm chasing. For me, like, there's probably something a bit more functional and then things that are a bit more emotional. I like this question because I hadn't really sat to think about like, what is my filter? Like, what is my rubric? For me, I think a big part of what I'm looking for is like, does it move me? And, that movement can come from a million places. It can be rebellious work. It can be, have a middle finger in the air. It can be emotional or poignant. It has to provide some sort of an emotionally resonant gut punch, because if I don't care about it, nobody else will. If I don't feel something because of it, no one else will. I look for work that has risk embedded in it, because a big part of what we do at Chiat and at TBWA is, we've got a methodology and an ethos that's called disruption. There's a lot that can go into that, but the thing that really works for me the best is the way that it looks for convention. Convention being status quo, that's just how it is, isms, the way things are always done. It is a heat-seeking missile for those things and then tries to annihilate them. Not just because it's fun, because it is fun, but we do it because it helps you do something distinct, do something different, do something, quite frankly, that culture usually really values, because even if we're unaware of it, we probably really like blowing up a convention like that. And then probably the last one is like ideas that are so unexpected, they're expected. Like when you find those truths or those insights, like Airbnb was a brand that I worked on for years. We found a truth around people traveling like tourists, going and doing a city. I don't even go to museums in my real life. Why am I traveling halfway around the world in Paris to go to a museum? And no one would have ever expressed it that way. But that insight and that truth, that convention led us to work that you were like, oh, thank God somebody finally said this. So it's that goes for the emotional jugular, moves me in some way, takes a risk or breaks a convention. And then ideally it's something that's so, like, you don't have to over explain it, but it's unexpected, coming from quite an expected and true place for people.
How do you know when something is going to land just right, when that risk is going to be well placed, and when it might be just too far.
I think a big part of that has to be about knowing what that brand is in the world to achieve or do. And I'm not talking about like capital P purpose, but I'm talking about Airbnb standing for belonging or Apple standing for creativity. If you know why those brands exist in the world, you only mess with convention that stops that vision from being true. So if you are just a rebel without a cause, you're just looking to kind of mess stuff up because it's fun, I think that's really easy to run afoul and just go too far, like take on something that didn't really needed to be taken on. But if you're asking yourself, like, what's standing in the way, what is stopping or slowing this brand from achieving sort of its full-throated vision, that's how you make sure you're doing it for the right reason. And it's also like, I mean, this is maybe not a particularly popular thing to say in the age of AI, which I think is incredibly useful for us in a lot of ways, but creative taste, cultural taste, so many of the people we're working with, whether it's creators, brands, marketers, even our creatives inside of an agency, we have thousands of years combined of creative taste. And I don't think there's any substitute for that. Certainly within the confines of getting to work, there's a lot of stuff that you see that you're like, oh, we got to figure out a way to tell this person this is going nowhere without absolutely demoralizing them. But I think that's part of the fun of the job. You know what I mean? It's like you see so much work and you see so many ideas and there are so many good things.
Yep.
And then you know it when the great shows up.
Yep. Yeah. I love that. Okay, a couple of things.
Yeah, go on.
One is, I think the idea of creative and what creative is in a world that's really dominated by content creators, like this always on cycle of new content being created, that works, right? We know that content resonates with customers today. It drives massive purchasing power, but also brand loyalty, engagement. It's like the conversations and communities that customers are in today. How has that shaped the way you approach your work today? Are those inputs into how you shape your strategy? Are they channels in which you can execute good creative? Like, how do you think about the world of creators and influencers in the big idea work you do?
One of the initial responses that I saw to the creator economy that I did not love was, in particular, sort of, wood paneled agencies going, uh-oh, these kids are better at our job than we are. And that to me completely misses the point of what they are providing. I think creators are an endless source of inspiration. They are often showing us the edges of culture. They help us see around the corner of culture, sometimes before something has hit in the lives of consumers, or you're able to research it or find out through data. And then I think that they are platforms. Like, and I know that's very similar to what you were asking around, are they channels? It's like, yes, they are channels, but I think the best creators are platforms. A lot like a brand. They've got a set of values. They've got a point of view. They've got a reason why they're there. And I think the best thing we can do is either hook up with like-minded creators. I also love it when opposing forces get together, because that's where tension comes from. That's where two things that shouldn't make sense together start to get kind of interesting. So creators are, I think, a blessing if you use them appropriately. Sure, they can be a curse if you want to talk about attention as a finite resource, but I just think that's not the move for me, because I think that means we start coming from a place of fear and looking to the left and right and what are other people doing, because that's when you lose your clarity of thought.
So I'm assuming you do and lead a ton of pitches. Like, percentage of your work, how much of it is pitching?
There's a comma after my title and it just says Global Chief Strategy Officer, comma, pitch bitch, which is just constant. Yeah, I mean, pitching is a huge part of what we do. I actually think this is a big part of what has actually led to my success. Pitching for new business, like, it is usually quite a high stakes thing. You might, depending on where you are in your career as an agency, you might know, if we don't win this, I know how many jobs are at stake here. I know who's on the chopping block. I know whose livelihood. We're very close. We call ourselves a TBWA collective. I know a lot about the people that I work with. And so you start to go, wow, this is quite intense. There's a lot of pressure here. And that is the surest fire way to just screw it up. pitches are fun. Like
Mm.
there's something beautiful about coming into a fresh problem or a brand you've always admired or one that you think should be getting a greater share of attention and love and just getting to have a whack at it,
Mm.
oftentimes in isolation. So much of working with clients or marketers or creators, it's a partnership, it's a relationship, it's a collaboration, it's a back and forth. Pitch is the only time where you don't have that extra input. It'd be terrifying, but at least for me and I think a lot of us within agencies, it gets fun. Like
Mm.
it's a little brutal, but it's fast. You're kind of dancing on the knife's edge of what's possible. And I think that idea that anything is possible because you don't know enough, you don't know a
Sure,
lot.
yeah.
So you've got to make informed guesses, naive guesses. But if you do a pitch the right way, what a marketer gets to see is what could be for them.
Yep.
That freshness is for me like when they go back to back, when they're back to back, you kind of want to crawl into a hole and die. But and they can be a good time. So what percentage of my job is, I mean, there's not a day that goes by.
I was going to say, you kind of answered it with the
There's
title.
not a day that goes by that I am not sitting here going, how are we going to win? How are we going to win this?
Yeah. What makes, you talked about obviously the
Mm.
idea, the strength of the idea that you bring into the room is a huge part of the work. What makes a good pitch in the room? Like how do you land that moment, that story? I think so much of what we do as marketers,
Yeah.
internally and externally, is pitching,
Yeah.
right? Like that is a
Yeah.
concept that translates into all of our work. How do you, come up with the driving insight, package it in a way that's compelling, land it in the room so that you can get the resources, connections, answers you need.
Yeah.
What makes a good pitch? How do you land the plane?
Ooh. Look, disruption will always be the answer as long as I'm at TBWA. And even if I wasn't at TBWA, for me, like it's the mess with the convention. It is do the thing that no one else has done yet.
Like provoke a little
A
bit.
little bit. Yeah, you got to jab. If they wanted things to be
Mm.
exactly as they were, if they already had the answer, they wouldn't do it. Pitches are expensive for clients. It pulls them away from their day job of running the brand or the business. You're often paying a consultant, you're having long meetings. Like it is a true cost, whether it's a economic cost or just your time.
Yep.
So for me, for us, like it's come in with a point of view. And I'm not saying here's 3 or 4 choices. It's in with a moral imperative.
Mm.
If you don't do this, you're crazy.
Yep.
You're squandering it. Don't do it.
I also love this idea of just acknowledge that if you're being asked to do something, again, whether it's a pitch from a customer in your world or whether it's an ask from your boss and like your day to day, right? For any of us, you're being asked because there's an opportunity, there's a need for change. And so approaching the work with like the baseline is something needs to change, not just like deliver more of the same. I think that's really good for us. We, in the kind of B2B SaaS world, it tends to be really formulaic historically. And that has been something, even when I got into this work, that I was really fearful of, because I, like you, am like a big fan of going against the grain and like knocking convention. And I have found that's been where we find our best work, is to kind of break that formula, right? Like there's benefit to creating a machine and repeatable patterns, but the inputs, like the fuel that goes into that, has to be fresh, has to be new, has to be fun, both to work on, but also to see and engage with out of the
How
gate.
do you balance those two ends of that spectrum, right? Like, yes, in the world of B2B and SaaS, you do. There are some conventions that you can't break because they're useful, they're helpful, they do something. While at the same time, inputs need to be fresh. Like, how do you make sure your crew is delivering that?
I think we're really lucky because we work with rich consumer brands. And so they expect a level of storytelling, creative, right? Like they don't necessarily want to work with like the boring technology company. But also I think you can bring your strengths. Like we, in some respects, are a little bit the boring technology company in a very fun, exciting space. But like we are governance, brand safety, right? All of the grown-up problems that the creator economy, that creator marketing is solving for today. Like we're kind of built for that. And so kind of comes back to what you were saying, is like, find that thing, like that truth that works. It's like, we were the grown-up in the room before there were grown-ups in the room. And so that's kind of a fun place to play. And we can bring everybody along. It gives us the opportunity to really lead from the front, to have conversations with very smart people about the work they're trying to do and how we ultimately can facilitate that. Because it's not about us in the end, right? It's about facilitating great work, great relationships, great
Mm.
connections for the brands we work with and their consumers through creators.
I think that's a truth, though. Like, real rebellion takes proper rigor.
Mm.
You have to know the rules intimately in order to break them.
I totally agree. I think the other thing for us is because we are in such a
Mm.
disruptive category. I mean, like,
You don't have
this
to
is such
borrow
an
it.
interesting talk about tension. Like, I feel like there is absolutely room for both when you talk about big traditional creative advertising,
Mm.
storytelling, and then the power of creators and what they can do individually and at scale. I think the table is big enough for both.
Yeah.
But I also fully believe that the game has changed, right? That the stories people want to listen to, the connections they want to make, the communities they want to exist in,
Mm.
it's not a one-way dialogue. It's a conversation that is happening all the
That's right.
time, everywhere,
That's right.
and typically with and via creators.
There's a bit of work that's just come out of, so I'm at TBWA now, but Chiat, which was the agency that I spent a lot of years in before that, we pitched and won Levi's about 2 years ago. And we are currently in the process this year of effectively remaking ads, classic, iconic Levi's ads, you know, the laundrette, the pool shark one, but remaking them with Beyonce and remaking them through sort of the Black female narrative lens, reimagining quite white cis shit through that lens, and it's been super successful. But to your point earlier about what are people saying when you're not in the room, that which is, I think, truly the definition of brand, but also how are brands joining forces with fandom and community and culture is such a big deal. So in that work, we hired actually 2 creators to be on our creative team who knew deep tracks from Beyonce. And I mean, like, stuff she was posting on Hipstamatic in her, like, when Kelly Rowland of Destiny's Child is like texting Nelly on XL, remember? And she didn't get a response from him, but everyone's like, but like really knew, like, these, you know, from the Bayhive, these like very would be completely missed by you or I or anyone that didn't know her very well, but they embedded these Easter eggs and these signals and codes into the work.
Yeah.
And it is created, you know, these are televisions, you know, TV spots, films. And so these things are running. And meanwhile, you've got this complete buzz and excitement as that culture, that tribe is effectively watching that work and going, oh, I think they're referencing this. I think this is coming next. I think this is what she's trying to communicate to us. And this is where I think, whether it's examples like that or just sharing the pen, quite frankly, with other creators, this is where brands do have such blue sky ahead of them if they can get out of, I think, just how it is of how advertising typically works, which is more controlled, which is more monologue, not dialogue. But who wants that anymore? I think you're right when you say, like, the landscape has changed. It's never going back.
Okay, 2 things. One, I mean, working with Beyonce, obviously massive. You've probably had several moments in your career where you kind of step back, if you did, and were like, this is my life right now. What are some memorable moments over the last, I don't know, decade where you kind of have a pinch me moment that you're getting to do this work or be on this stage or have this platform?
Yeah. Oh, there's been a lot of good. I mean, I've been really lucky. I've been very grateful. I've had people that have believed in me and, like, sometimes pushed me on to stages and into rooms before I was ready. And I love that sort of sink or swim of it all. Last year, for the first time, I took the main stage at Cannes to talk about, and I did it with my CEO partner, Aaron Riley, with one of the producers from Broad City, and a guy called Kyle Chayka, who's written this brilliant book called Filter World, talking about how algorithms are flattening culture. I was effectively sort of the opener and the lead and facilitated a conversation with this group about the blanding and the beiging and the way that algorithms and best practices are sort of rounding the edges off of creativity. That was such a full circle, pinch yourself, I'm the luckiest girl in advertising today moment, because it was both obviously a high profile opportunity. It really talked to the confidence that the leadership of TBWA has in me, but it was also talking about something that has just been in my gut from the beginning, which is nothing displeases me more than when I see a brief or a strategy or a bit of work that you're like, I could have told you what that was going to be. It was predictable. I saw it coming. It was familiar. It didn't surprise me. And so the chance to take the stage and to talk about both that philosophy and that point of view, but then to talk about solutions with people making brilliant entertainment like Hacks and Broad City, to talk about someone who's really researched the problem,
Mhm.
like real idols and mentors of mine. That was the best. That was
That's
it,
really cool.
probably. Yeah.
The idea of disruption, I think, is really interesting in a landscape that is constantly
Yeah.
changing. Obviously, I think I stood up in January at our all company summit and said, a year and 27 days, like
Hmm.
all that had happened between January 1st and January 27th when we were all gathered together in a time that is rapidly changing. Again, change isn't new,
Yeah.
but I think that pace is accelerating.
Yeah.
Advancements in technology, uncertainty around
Yeah.
channels like TikTok, macroeconomics, tariffs, just
Yeah.
uncertainty. How do you find kind of a North Star in uncertainty? How do you navigate uncertainty and ambiguity, even in the context of, the agency that you work in and all of the change that has happened and, may still be ahead?
Okay, Oprah. All right. So that's she a big question. I love this one. Okay, so there's a couple places I would go on this. One is around like I do think strategists are really well equipped to deal with change. Strategy is effectively the process of transformation, behavior change. It's changing people's minds, how they act. And so for that reason, I never assume things are locked. I assume things are unlocked and they're just going to fly around in our faces until, maybe they'll settle for a minute and then the graviton's going to pick back up and all the furniture will come up off the floor and it'll spin around again.
So change is less scary because you just always know. It's like a felt sense that like it's going to
Yeah.
happen.
It's a felt sense, and it's often what I'm trying to do. It
Mm.
is often my objective to try to get people to really see or act differently. So for that reason, it doesn't quite get me, I think, the way it does someone that is like solely responsible, for example, the P&L or the financials, because I think that is where things can feel really significant. We deal with a lot of clients, many of our clients, every single one of them actually are going, it is volatile out there right now. Things are unpredictable. But one of the things that I talk about and preach and believe in deeply is that the worst thing that you can do in that moment is to pull back. And look, you've got to have empathy for any marketer, any CEO who's like, ooh, this feels like the moment to hunker down, to do the safe thing, to not rock the boat in any way. I spoke to a woman who works at the Oxford School a couple of months ago about this. She told me actually that, like, truly, when we feel under threat, the human field of vision shrinks by 2/3. So, like, we get a pinhole view and people get quite focused on the change or on the danger or on the problem. And the moment that's where your view lands, that's when you start acting from fear. And it's very expensive, quite frankly, for a marketer to be familiar and safe. We never have a proxy for what's happening in the moment. What's happening right now from a geopolitical standpoint, from a civil unrest, war, etc. We have never experienced what's happening right now
Yep.
because it's a fresh take. But you look at what happened in 2008, the recession. You look at what happened coming out of COVID in 2020. Brands that continue to disrupt and invest in themselves came out heads and tails above competitors that quit spending, quit talking, quit creating. And so for that reason, we say the cost of not disrupting in uncertain times and volatile times is high. So, but that's our job as an agency, to walk alongside marketers and bring them confidence, give them both the ideas, but also the data and the discipline that helps them be brave. You have to respect, you have to have great reverence for the fact that many of our CMOs, they walk into boardrooms that we'll never walk into, and they have to pitch. They have to pitch to financial organizations, they have to pitch to product marketing teams, business units, and that's real. And some market, there are certainly some cultures that really reward risk taking and some that don't. And so it is our job to have incredible respect for that thing and to make sure that we have armed and really gone through the paces of going, are we sure? Are we sure? Are we confident? Is this what the world needs? And I think when we do that job right, there's no fear.
Yeah. And having empathy, again,
Yeah.
just like you are not in a dissimilar position than the CMOs that you're pitching to, right? Everyone is trying to kind of put their best foot forward, figure out what is the right move, again, land it, right? In a way that is convincing and brings conviction to the path ahead. And I do think that's like, it's big stuff, but it's also shared. We all do it in every aspect of our jobs, whether we're in the rooms with CMOs pitching, whether we are the CMOs, pitching or telling stories with the board, or whether we're the people putting the work together all day, every day. And I think that's pretty magical to remember. Okay, 2 final questions. One, we've talked a lot about kind of showing up and leaning in, for lack of a better word, in terms of what has been a key ingredient to your success, right? Showing up, being in the room, adding great thought. A little bit of a deep cuts on you, but like, I know you are a like cultural hound. Like, you are reading things, investigating things, trying to kind of stay in the mix at all times. What are 3 things that you are reading, participating in, listening to today that you think give you a good kind of pulse on where things are going?
I'm really interested right now in sort of the state or the era we are in around the internet. Think about the early 2000s, like the era of like, the internet's going to save us. It was Young Zuck. It was Global Village. It was internet pioneers. It was like all the good stuff. I think more recently, we've been living in a like internet pessimism. It's parasocial weirdness. It's doom scrolling. It's culture wars. I have to believe that we're moving into like a maybe more internet realism kind of place, where maybe we're going to find hope, a slightly more artful and wise experience of what the internet can give to us. I love Sean Monahan for this. He's got a gorgeous Substack that I obsessively keep up with. And so he does a lot of writing about that. So I'm very interested in that. And cyber sentimentality, I think, is a huge part of that. Like the return of Tumblr-esque, Molly Soda-esque, like I'm into that. I'm into that in a big way. In a slightly nerdier point of view, I'm really liking conversations about like what, US tariffs are a thing at the moment. What's the future for scaled global brands in a post-scale globalization has collapsed world? Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's it's like a big deal, kids in Berlin wearing Levi's and we're here drinking, I don't know, rosé. Like I think it's a real, so much of culture is also exported from US centric things. Like if you want to talk about music or fashion or parts of entertainment, like what we're streaming at the moment, I think US does a lot of that. I'm really curious who the next global soft power is going to be. Korea, I think, is a real bet to watch as they do K-beauty and K-dramas and the music. I think very, very interesting.
The biggest stuff you've never heard of, but definitely will.
Absolutely will. Yes. Okay, last one. White Lotus.
Well, there you go.
Amy Lou Woods' teeth.
Yes.
Like, the way that I think we've been living in such a like Instagram face era. You know what I mean? The fillers, the filters, whether you're doing it in real life or not. I hope I see a return to sort of more like idiosyncratic beauty. Maggie Rogers and all of her like wrinkly glory. I want to see more divergent beauty.
Yeah.
And maybe even the sense of like beauty is like, especially in a world of AI generated slop in some cases, the idea that like independent beauty features become sort of the equivalent of like brand. You know what I mean? The red hair, her teeth, whatever it is, that idea that actually those distinctive marks become markers of like a brand, because creators and makers are brands in and of themselves.
Sure.
I don't know. Those are the 3.
I mean, we just definitely veered into like your typical dinner conversation, because I know you don't like small talk.
No, I really don't.
So you just got like deep cuts, deep thoughts with Jen, just on a normal Tuesday.
If you're sitting next to me at dinner, I'm going to ask you how you lost your virginity, and I'm going to slip it in the most natural way, and we're going to not act like it's weird, and you'll probably tell me.
All right. Well, we won't get into that on this. Thank you so much for being here. I just have always admired you so much as a friend, as a human, and also as a professional. You're such a rock star. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
I adore you. Thank you.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by CreatorIQ. CreatorIQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at CreatorIQ.com.